The sky was on fire, not in the poetic amber-glow way of a sun setting over a proud empire. No, this was a funeral pyre stretching from the heart of the capital to the farthest horizon, the kind of fire that marked the end of something once considered invincible. The air was thick with smoke, heavy with the scent of burning alloys and something worse, something alive. The capital of the esteemed Zalari Dominion, once a beacon of intergalactic civilization, was crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance. Their spires, designed to last eons, cracked like brittle glass. Their streets, once pristine and overflowing, with dignitaries from across the stars, were now littered with debris and the silent, unmoving forms of those who had thought themselves untouchable. Above it all, a lone figure stood at the edge of the charred balcony of the imperial palace. A human. They had welcomed his kind with open arms once, hailing them as fascinating, clever, resourceful. They had called humanity a unique addition to their empire, a species worth uplifting. But they had mistaken adaptability for compliance. They had mistaken curiosity for weakness. Now, their great empire was learning the cost of their mistake. From the smouldering ruins below, the guttural shrieks of Zalari commanders echoed through the air, calling for reinforcements that would never come. The human listened, expression unreadable, as one of them, broken and bloodied, staggered forward, its forearms shaking, its once glistening carapace blackened by soot and shrapnel. You betrayed us," it choked, mandibles clicking as it struggled to stay upright. The human exhaled slowly, surveying the inferno around them. The embers reflected in their eyes, distant but deliberate. "No," they said, voice barely above a whisper. "We just stopped pretending." And as the first of the palace walls gave way, collapsing into the firestorm below, the human turned. Their back on the ruins of the empire that had once welcomed them, now nothing more than ash and memory. Before the fire, before the betrayal, before the fall, there was only an invitation. The Zalari Dominion had ruled the known galaxy for millennia, an empire built on diplomacy, calculated conquest, and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. They prided themselves on their ability to uplift lesser civilizations, offering them the privilege of assimilation in exchange for unwavering loyalty. When humanity made first contact, the Zalari did not see a threat. They saw potential. At first, humans had been nothing more than an anomaly, another species plucked from the obscurity of a backwater world and given a seat in the Dominion's lesser councils. They were watched with amusement, their stubborn nature dismissed as a primitive quirk, their adaptability noted but ultimately underestimated. The humans, for their part, played along. They attended the galactic summits, nodded along to Zalari decrees and adapted, faster than expected. They learned the Dominion's language, its customs, its weaknesses. They navigated the complex bureaucracy with unnerving ease. They studied the Zalari's technology, reverse engineering systems, once thought impossible to replicate. It should have been a warning. Instead, the Zalari mistook it for submission. "They are eager," High Chancellor Ziraval had once mused in the Great Hall, watching a human diplomat bow before the Dominion's council. Eager and useful, a convenient addition. A lesser species, eager to prove itself. No one questioned it when humans integrated into their military. No one raised an alarm when human scientists proposed more efficient infrastructure designs. And when the Dominion began recruiting humans into higher positions of governance, none of the ruling elites had foreseen the future now unfolding in fire and ruin. But they should have. The signs were there, buried beneath the arrogance of an empire that had never been challenged. The humans had watched, they had learned, and they had waited. And now, as the embers of the once proud capital painted the horizon in burning hues, one thing was clear. The Dominion had not welcomed an ally. They had invited their own extinction. The fall of an empire does not happen in a single moment. It unravels slowly, piece by piece, long before the first flames ever touch the sky. It started with whispers. The Zelari, confident in their dominion over lesser species, did not recognize the cracks forming in their foundation. Small changes, subtle shifts, overlooked because they came from the humans. A failed supply route here, a misplaced fleet deployment there, disruptions too minor to warrant true concern, yet frequent enough to stir unease among those who paid attention. The Zelari elite dismissed the unease as paranoia. They had done this before, uplifted countless species, expanded their empire without resistance. But the humans were different. They did not resist, they adapted, and that made them more dangerous than any war fleet. Behind closed doors, humans gained access to critical systems. They integrated into military command, logistics, even intelligence. When the Dominion began assigning humans to key operations, it was seen as a sign of their loyalty. It was something else entirely. They spread like a contagion. Admiral Vorzek, one of the few who had grown suspicious, had muttered to his peers, "Always learning, always watching. This is not submission. This is reconnaissance." No one listened. Then the disappearances began. Mid-ranking Zelari officials, military strategists, high-profile researchers, not in battle, not in accidents, just gone. Their records erased, their last known locations redacted from official logs. The explanations were thin, the reassurances weaker. The tension grew. Zelari Command began restricting human access to certain intelligence. Humans, in turn, began altering data faster than it could be secured. The Dominion's network, once thought impenetrable, was already compromised, and by the time the High Chancellor issued the first order for re-evaluations of human integration, it was too late. The humans were already in place, embedded in every level of governance, every fleet, every strategic point that mattered. And when the first strikes came, they weren't from an invading force. They came from within. The first strike did not come with a declaration of war. It came in silence. At 0200 Galactic Standard Time, the Dominion's central defense grid suffered a catastrophic systems failure. Automated turrets went dark. Long-range scanners flickered offline. The Dominion's early warning systems, once thought infallible, showed nothing but static. No alarm sounded. No fleet movements were detected, and yet the heart of the Empire was already bleeding. Across the capital world of Zelrathis, key structures collapsed in coordinated explosions. The Imperial Communications Hub, responsible for interstellar relays, was reduced to molten slag before emergency protocols could be activated. Orbital defense stations turned their weapons inward, bombarding critical infrastructure instead of incoming threats. For the first time in recorded history, the Dominion's command structure fractured, not from an enemy at their gates, but from an enemy within their walls. It was not an invasion. It was an execution. Admiral Vorzek, one of the few who had suspected humanity's true nature, awoke to the sound of gunfire outside his private estate. His personal guard, a contingent of elite Zelari warriors, had been cut down before they could sound the alarm. He barely had time to draw his sidearm before his security door slid open. A human stood in the doorway, clad in the sleek black armor of the Dominion's own Special Operations Division. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, Vorzek exhaled, mandibles clicking in grim realization. So it's true. The human tilted their head, eyes devoid of sympathy. It was always true, they replied. A single silenced shot ended Vorzek's story. He was not the first. He would not be the last. By dawn, over half of the Dominion's high-ranking officials had been assassinated. Military command centers had fallen under human control. The surviving Zelari leadership scrambled to issue countermeasures, but the moment they activated emergency protocols, they found themselves locked out of their own systems. Human engineers had rewritten the code. Human strategists had rerouted supply lines. Human soldiers, once allies, now stood as executioners. And as the first of the Dominion's war fleets attempted to mobilize, they learned the full extent of their downfall. Their ships would not fly. The humans had already won. The Dominion did not collapse with a final battle. It collapsed in a series of quiet, inevitable failures. As dawn broke over Zelratis, the great capital world was unrecognizable. Where once its skyline had shimmered with towering monoliths of progress, now only ruins stood, monuments to arrogance and miscalculation. Smoke curled from the wreckage of command centers, defense grids lay inoperable, and the once proud banners of the Dominion hung tattered, swaying in the updraft of distant fires. Across the Empire, confusion turned to panic. Outlying fleets, still awaiting orders from a command that no longer existed, drifted aimlessly, their captains paralyzed by indecision. Some attempted to rally, to send distress signals, but their messages were intercepted, their channels hijacked. The responses they received were not from Zelari High Command. They were from humans. "We are in control now." The words were simple, inevitable. Resistance flickered like a dying star. A few commanders attempted last-ditch offensives, launching fleets against systems suspected to harbor human strongholds. They found only empty space, ghost worlds, and then the retaliation began. The humans had not simply infiltrated, they had prepared. Entire Dominion shipyards had been commandeered. Weapon caches had been emptied long before the first shot was fired. When the Zelari finally grasped the depth of their failure, human warships, Zelari built, but no longer under their command, appeared from the dark void, moving with chilling precision. They did not fight as invaders. They fought as executioners. Planets that resisted burned. Admirals who refused to surrender vanished. The heart of the Dominion was carved out piece by piece, not by overwhelming firepower, but by the realization that they had never truly been in control. And then, at the center of it all, the Imperial Palace, once the seat of absolute power, stood open and defenseless. It was there, among the ruins, that High Chancellor Ziraval knelt, staring at the sky above, her once glorious empire smouldering around her. The air crackled with distant screams, the last remnants of a rule that had lasted thousands of years crumbling into irrelevance. A human stood before her, clad in the same black armor that had haunted the Dominion's final days. They did not gloat, they did not monologue, they simply waited. Shiraval's mandibles twitched, her voice a rasp. This was never a war, was it? The human's expression did not change. "No," they said. "This was justice." And with that, the last ruler of the Dominion lowered her head, because deep down she knew the Dominion had not been conquered, it had been corrected. The war was over. But wars never truly end. The Dominion had ruled for millennia, an unchallenged behemoth that had stretched its influence across the stars. Now its capital was a smouldering ruin, its fleets scattered, its rulers dead or in chains, and humanity stood among the ashes, victorious, but not unchanged. Across the conquered systems, silence lingered. The Zelari survivors, those who had not fought, who had not resisted, stood in a quiet, stunned daze. Their once proud empire had been dismantled not by brute force, but by something far more terrifying: inevitability. They had welcomed humans into their halls as allies, and now they looked upon them as something else entirely. Beneath the banners of fire and shadow, a new reality took shape. The humans had not come for conquest. They had come for retribution. The Dominion's crimes had been many. The broken species left in their wake, the civilizations swallowed whole under the guise of uplift, the cultures erased in the name of order. All of it had been written into the annals of history as progress. Humanity had simply turned their own systems against them. But now, standing at the precipice of their greatest victory, the question remained: what came next? Would humanity become the very thing they had destroyed? Would they wear the chains of rulers as easily as they had shattered them? Or would they walk away, leaving the dominion to drown in its own ruin? The answer was neither simple nor immediate. New power had risen, not from the ashes of an empire, but from the shadows beneath it. Humanity had proven itself not as another pawn in the galactic order, but as something far more dangerous, a species that could never be controlled. And as the first human envoy stepped onto the ruined palace steps, Zalari survivors fell to their knees, awaiting their fate. The human leader, clad in the same black armor that had overseen the fall of an empire, spoke just 2 words: "Stand up." Not as prisoners, not as subjects, but as equals. And so the dominion was no more. The future belonged to those willing to take it. The fall of the Dominion sent ripples through the galaxy. For centuries, the Zalari had been the unshakable center of civilization, a force that dictated order and crushed dissent with cold efficiency. They had shaped the known universe in their image, enforcing their laws upon species deemed too weak, too primitive, or too rebellious to stand alone. Now, they were nothing but a cautionary tale. The news spread faster than light itself. Across the remnants of the Dominion's vast expanse, worlds once subjugated under Zalari rule looked to the skies in disbelief. Some celebrated, tearing down the banners of a fallen empire and raising their own for the first time in generations. Others watched in silence, wondering if the destroyers of their oppressors would become something worse. Humanity had won, but their victory had left a vacuum. The question was no longer who ruled, but what came next. Humanity did not claim the throne. There was no grand proclamation, no coronation of a supreme ruler. The humans, who had orchestrated the Dominion's downfall, did not sit upon the broken throne of Zelrathis, nor did they raise their own flag over the ruins. Instead, they disappeared. They had moved like ghosts, infiltrating an empire without a single fleet invasion. And just as quickly, they faded from the center of the galaxy, vanishing into the dark like a shadow retreating from the fire. There was no formal human government to replace the Dominion, no fleet to occupy conquered worlds, no tribute demanded. From those left standing, only silence. And silence in the aftermath of empire was more terrifying than war. The Zalari, broken and leaderless, did not know what to do with themselves. Some tried to rebuild, but without their vast bureaucratic machine, their species splintered. The conquered worlds, long chained under Dominion rule, seized the opportunity to establish their own sovereignties. The galaxy had fractured. But one truth remained. No one would ever underestimate humanity again. Rumors began to spread, whispers of human operatives still embedded in major galactic factions, warlords who had once been Zalari governors suddenly vanishing. Supply chains disrupted in ways eerily reminiscent of the Dominion's own fall. No one knew if humanity had truly left, or if they were simply watching. In the underworld of the galaxy, there were now 2 unspoken laws. Never assume a species is weak because they smile and adapt. If a human ever asks for your trust, understand that they already know what you're going to say. And so the universe continued, forever changed, forever uncertain. Humanity had not conquered the stars. They had corrected them, and that was far more terrifying.